I like your flexibility. A few minutes ago, everybody was looking that side. Now they look that side, and I hope next time they're looking that side. It's quite sufficient flexibility here. And I liked also this Wilbrand table. I will also keep away my notes. I'll talk extempo. I think we need to go back to history, and perhaps practical experiences would help a lot. We need the partnership. We need the dialogue. I lived in a period where, when I was involved in establishing the Conflict Management Center, we were not allowed to seek for external funding from anywhere. That was the rule then. We were not allowed to seek for external funding from anywhere. What we used to call, or what is normally known in nomenclature as extra budgetary financing, was not allowed. We have moved to a level where we have now a possibility of accessing funds in Europe and elsewhere. And we are serious about this relationship. Years ago, Jay wouldn't be here. Now we have Jay as ambassador representing the African Union. That demonstrates our seriousness and our capacity and intention to work with and promote this partnership. What was raised here today reminds me of three things, and that has to do more with my own biases and my experience. And it has to do with the funding. Thank you. I'm sorry. That has to do with the sustainability of funding. And I'll make a couple of points and then move to another. My experience at that time, and I'm glad now it has changed, and we have the people here who deal with this from day to day, we had one major problem from the African point of view. And I'm sure Jay is addressing that now with Pete. One was the disbursement procedures, especially with the African European Union. Quite cumbersome at that time from an institution that was coming from no funding, no external funding, to accepting external funding, but with serious, complicated, complex disbursement procedures. You sign an agreement, it takes about a year to receive the funds. By that time, millions have died. I'm glad that we have people now who see this differently, and we will be able to address this, the disbursement procedures. The second, and I'm talking out of experience, the second is actually an excuse rather than a fundamental issue, and that is the issue of absorptive capacity. Often we are told that the African Union does not have absorptive capacity because the 10 million that was given the previous year has not been spent. But the truth of the matter is that the 10 million came 1 year later. And so you cannot hold the African Union responsible for lack of absorptive capacity, even though it might exist in some form, but rather into looking into the procedures on how do we accelerate disbursement. And of course, that has to do with capacity development at all levels, capacity building at regional level itself, at sub-regional level, and with the civil society organizations. I think this is something that we need to, as we think of a new partnership, we need to look at this more seriously. There is also the issue, and I think you're familiar with, in conflict prevention, the principle of subsidiarity. I've gone through this experience for years, that who really is responsible for a particular, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea-Bissau, in Mali, where does the principle of subsidiarity really stands in a partnership? And these are issues that we need to address, and they're quite serious issues. Normally, the first port of call will be the sub-regional or regional organization. We've seen different, and that has to do with what the president said earlier. We have seen dramatic changes in the determinants of foreign policy, particularly since the end of the Cold War. And that has influenced not only the relationship, but even the disbursement procedures. I think this we need to be very frankly and talk about them. It's something that we need to address. Linked to that, this principle of subsidiarity, is this tendency we notice now of marginalization of regional and sub-regional organizations. This is very serious. If we want to build a strong partnership, we need to address, we need to give, well, let me take it back a little bit. At the level of the African Union, the problem has always been point of entry, entry point, that's what we call in the nomenclature, entry point. But if you follow the principle of subsidiarity, there should be no problem with entry point. And if you look at the Constitutive Act of the African Union, the issue of entry point is clearly spelled out. What really happens is that when you have other elements, other considerations of foreign policy, that we run into serious problems and we don't want to discuss them. I don't want to talk about, well, let me put it. Jay was saying we have to be provocative because that's the only way we learn. Was the UN resolution on Libya meant to be a regime change? Many will say no. Others will say perhaps it was an accident. But we've seen it repeated here and there in Mali, not in Mali, in Cote d'Ivoire. What really happened in Cote d'Ivoire? I think as we structure our relationship based on our APSA, we need to interrogate some of these issues. How do we work ourselves effectively by addressing, not by taking the ostrich policy of burying the head under the sun and wait for the sun doom to pass, but actually holding the bull by the head and discuss these things openly. Now we have an ambassador. I'm glad we have an ambassador. He will be able to raise some of these issues. Funding must be predictable. Thank you. I think that's the end of the Italian flexibility. Funding must be predictable. And I think these are issues that we know, but not only disbursement must also be predictable. And we should be able to work on a strategy that allows us to have some degree of confidence in the funding mechanisms. Thank you.